In the opening hours of the attack, Israeli forces are quickly routed. On the northern front, masses of Syrian armor steadily advance into the Golan Heights. And on the Sinai front, the situation for the Israelis is even more desperate.
My brigade was the only brigade along the Suez Canal responsible for a front of 200 kilometers. Egyptian aircraft were bombing. 2,200 artillery guns were firing ammunition. The feeling was as the desert is moving, like earthquake. I had 88 tanks and 850 Egyptian tanks were crossing the Suez Canal.
The tanks bearing down by the hundreds on Reshef and his men are Soviet-designed T-55s. At 40 tons, the T-55 is relatively small, but it can move up to 30 miles per hour and is armed with a 100mm main cannon, providing a perfect balance of speed and deadly firepower.
Immediately, we had our first casualties over there. We tried to avoid them from crossing, but the ratio between their forces and our forces are unthinkable.
In response, the Israelis send their elite air force to smash the advancing Egyptian invaders.
The Israelis, they always depend on their quick and effective airstrike. So the first lesson the Egyptians consider is how to eliminate the Israeli airstrike by surface-to-air missile, by creating what we call the wall, okay, a rocket wall. In the first 2 days, the Israeli Air Force lost more than 1/3 of its airplanes, so they decided to stop any airstrike at all.
With the Israeli Air Force neutralized, the Egyptians can begin the most difficult and dangerous phase of their operation, the crossing of the Suez Canal.
The minute you just see the canal, you can just have tears, because it was just a great feeling that you get this piece of land back.
The Egyptian crossing of Suez is an absolutely brilliant military operation. They have figured out every aspect of the canal crossing. They know that the Israelis are reliant on these huge sand barriers to try to keep the Egyptians away, and they develop high-powered water hoses that allow them to effectively just spray holes using water to erode the sand and cut passages through these Israeli sand berms.
The Egyptian operation has gone like clockwork. And in the first 18 hours of the attack, they send 90,000 men and 850 tanks across the Suez Canal. By the end of the day, the Egyptians have advanced almost 5 miles into the Sinai. Now all that stands between the Egyptian invasion force and the Israeli heartland are a couple of hundred tanks, most of which are just arriving on the battlefield as part of the IDF's armored reserves.
The Israeli armored reserves in Sinai immediately do what they have been trained, taught, ordered to do: counterattack. This time, they're in for a very rude awakening.
October 6, 1973. After a massive artillery barrage and wave after wave of airstrikes, hundreds of Egyptian tanks surge across the Suez Canal and storm into the Israeli-occupied Sinai Desert.